everyone, welcome to SureenaSpeaks, and in this video I'm going to go over, as requested by you guys, professional fees, levy versus non-levy, in which situations you take how many prescription charges, and I think some of the beneficial resources to complement this video is, for example, the drug tariffs. You've got the online version and the hardback copy, the PSNC website, where I will quote different links and put them in the description box below, as well as your own systems that you use at work. So depending on what system you use, it usually will generate how much that prescription charge will cost, as well as looking at your manufacturer's list of prices. So let's start off with professional fees. So this can be found in the drug tariff in part 3A, the drug tariff, and you receive a professional fee for every item that you dispense. So your medicine, your appliances, and it's really important that we endorse our prescriptions properly, because depending on that will then determine what fees we get from it. So for example, if it's a specials item, you would endorse it with SP. If it was a compression stocking, which had to be measured and fitted, you would endorse it MF. And on the PSNC website, there's a full extensive list of which situations you would have to endorse, which prescriptions, items, how you would endorse it. So do make sure to check that out. Now with NHS prescriptions, you have private prescriptions. With private prescriptions, theoretically, you can charge any amount you want. There is no guidance or restrictions on how much you charge a person. But in general, with most pharmacies, they usually use it based on a formula of how much the item costs, times by a professional fee, times by a dispensing fee. But each pharmacy has their own calculations of doing this, depending again what systems you use, even which areas of the country you're in, that will determine how much that will cost. So if you're in London, private prescriptions tend to be a bit more expensive than if you're outside of London. So that's why if you go to 5 different pharmacies, they will quote you 5 different prices for that same private prescription. But then we also have our NHS prescriptions. So talking about England, so whilst this video is being made and it's going out, at the moment in England, a prescription costs £8.80 per item. This goes up by 20p every April. So just before April 2018, it was £8.60. April rolled on, it's gone up to £8.80. And what this represents is our contribution to the NHS. But in England, there are some situations where patients don't have to pay for their prescriptions. And we can categorise our patients as 2 types. We have levy and non-levy. Levy essentially means charge. So charge, no charge. And if we look at the back of I hope you can see this properly. This is the, I think you can see a bit better there. This is an FP10 England NHS prescription. On the back is a list of patients who are exempt from having to pay. So our non-levy patients. These include, for example, patients who are under 16 years old. If you're 16, 17 or 18 and in full-time education. If you're 17 and you're in work, you're working, you don't come under this category. You have to be in full-time education. Those that are over 60 don't have to pay. Those that have a maternity card, so they're pregnant or they've just given birth. Those that have a medical exemption card, so for example, patients who are on long-term conditions taking long-term medication. These include patients with an underactive thyroid and they're taking levothyroxine, or patients that have type 1 or type 2 diabetes, and again they're taking medication to treat that. They will come under this medical exemption category. They do have to apply for a medical exemption card, so do make sure that patients who are, for example, have type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes or are on levothyroxine, double check that they have applied for their medical exemption card or their medical exemption certificate, that they do have their medical exemption card at hand, so that you are double checking that they are ticking the right box, because ultimately if a patient ticks that they are exempt from paying and it turns out they're not, they will be charged a fine. I think it's about £100. So it's really important that the right box is ticked at the back of every single prescription. You also have patients that might have applied for a prepayment certificate. So this is really beneficial if patients are on a lot of medicines, but these don't come under the medical exemption category. So what they can do is they can pay £29.10 for a 3-month prepayment certificate, or they can pay £104 for a 12-month prepayment certificate, and this will cover their NHS prescriptions. So their FP10s, even their FP10 dental prescriptions, it will all be covered under this. So they won't have to pay any additional charges. So for example, if you have a patient who is on 4 medications, each at £8.80, this is going to cost them £35.20. That's a pretty considerable amount. And say they're only actually getting their medicines for every 2 months. That means every 2 months they're having to pay that £35.20. Whereas actually, if they got that 3-month certificate, that would be covered and they would only be paying £29.10. Or if they paid the £104 certificate, then over the year, again, they're going to make a massive, massive saving. So do make sure that patients who are on long-term medicines, who are having to pay pretty extortionate amounts for their medication every 2 months, 3 months, that they do know that there is this prepayment certificate available. They just need to type into Google prepayment certificate. There's a phone number, or you can do the online application form. Very, very easy to apply for. And again, the NHS in a few weeks' time will give them a little card which says prepayment certificate, and every one of their NHS medicines will then be covered, and NHS prescriptions will be covered under that. So it's really, really worthwhile. You also have patients who are also exempt, are those, for example, on job seekers allowance, who are on employment support allowance, even those that are eligible for NHS tax credit exemption. Again, all of these patients are covered and they would come under our non-levy category. And it's worth noting that any prepayment certificates or exemption certificates that are issued in England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales are all valid across the UK. So that was England. Let's look at Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Now, if you came from Wales and you have a Welsh prescription or you have a Scottish prescription and you've come over to England, you would have to pay. You would have the same requirements that are applied to an English prescription will be applied to that Welsh or Scottish prescription. So again, if you're under 16 or over 60, you wouldn't have to pay. But if you're not eligible for any of these exemptions and it's a Welsh or Scottish prescription that has come to England, you would have to pay. Not though if it's a prescription from Northern Ireland. So if you have a Northern Irish prescription and you come to England, you still don't have to pay. However, if you were in Wales and you were presented with a Welsh, a Scottish or a Northern Irish prescription, you wouldn't have to pay. But if you had an English prescription and that was presented in a Welsh pharmacy in Wales, you would have to pay. It would be the same English requirements would apply in this situation, unless you have a patient presents you with a Welsh prescription charge entitlement card, then they wouldn't have to. So ultimately, if you have a prescription, make it a Welsh, Scottish or Northern Irish prescription and get it dispensed in Wales, Scotland or Northern Ireland, because then you don't have to pay. If you come to England and you don't have any of those exemption rules, then you will have to pay. So let's go back to England. Let's go back to English prescriptions. And as we mentioned, each item is charged at £8.80. However, this isn't always the situation. So for example, if you have a contraceptive, again, a patient is exempt from paying. And this is actually one of the options in our back of our prescriptions. So they would tick that, they're exempt from having to pay. If you had the same medicine, but 2 different strengths on there, again, a patient only has to pay 1 charge. So say you have sertraline 100 milligrams and you have sertraline 50 milligrams, because it's the same medicine, regardless that it's 2 different strengths, that still costs £8.80. Same goes if you had penicillin 1 milligram tablets and penicillin 5 milligram tablets. It's the same medicine, regardless of the change in strengths, therefore it's 1 prescription charge at £8.80. This is where it gets complicated, because now if you had a prescription for penicillin 1 milligram and penicillin 5 milligram gastro-resistant tablets, that would now be 2 separate charges because they're of 2 different types. You have penicillin 1 and you've got the penicillin 5 gastro-resistant. So now they're not the same, so it'd be 2 charges. No, it would just be too plain and simple otherwise. They have to make it complicated. Other examples include, say you have Ensure drinks, but you dispense an Ensure chocolate, an Ensure banana, and an Ensure vanilla. When you're endorsing, that would come up as 3 items because you've endorsed 3 different flavours, but you would only charge the patient 1 charge because it's still Ensure drinks, despite the flavours being different. The same goes for 1 charge is if you have, say, a drug which needs to be supplied with a dropper or a vaginal applicator. So you might have estriol cream and you might have a vaginal applicator on the same prescription. That would be 1 charge because you kind of need one of the items for the other one, i.e. you need the vaginal applicator for the estriol cream. So that's just 1 charge as well. With exams, they do like to ask questions with regards to prescription charges. So they may say, for example, you have the option A, B, C, D, E. Which of these patients would have to pay the most for their prescription charge? So one might be a 75-year-old man who is on simvastatin tablets. Well, because he's 75 years old, he's over 60, so he doesn't have to pay for his prescriptions. So it's not going to be that answer. You might have a 45-year-old woman who's on microgynon. Again, microgynon is a contraceptive. Again, that's covered in our exemptions, so they wouldn't have to pay. You might have a patient who is 50 years old and they are on ramipril and simvastatin tablets. So in this situation, they're under 60, they're onto medicines which don't come under the medical exemption category. They haven't mentioned that they're on a prepayment certificate. Therefore, in this situation, they'd be paying 2 charges. So £8.80 plus £8.80, they'd be paying £17.60. So it could be this person. You might have another option of a person who is on Nova Rapid and Lantus, and they are 19 years old. Again, they're covered under the medical exemption category, so they wouldn't have to pay. And the last option might be that you have a person who is 59 years old, they are on a pair of stockings and let's say class 2 black thigh stockings, and they are also on losartan tablets. Now, even though they're on 2 items, theoretically, they have the stockings and they're on losartan tablets, so you might presume, okay, there's 2 items, 2 charges. Actually, no, in this situation, those thigh stockings come as a pair. And because they come as a pair, you're paying per leg. That's the easiest way that I think to think about it. And because that's the situation, you actually have to pay 2 charges for that. So 1 pair is 2 charges. So 1 charge for the left leg, 1 charge for the right leg. So they're actually paying 2 there, plus they're paying for their losartan tablets. So they're having 3 charges. So in this example, the patient paying the most would be the person that has the stockings and that is on those losartan tablets. So with a lot of HRT medication, so hormone replacement therapy medication, again, a lot of them have 2 different active ingredients in them. So something like Femiston 1 by 10 milligrams, 1 milligram / 10 milligram tablets, they, even though that's 1 item, because it contains 2 different active ingredients, again, you would give 2 charges. If you have, for example, Canesten Combi, pessary plus cream, because there's a combi pack, again, and it contains the pessary and it contains the cream, again, this would be 2 charges. Yep, they like to make things confusing. But as mentioned, a lot of this is in the PSNC website for different examples. This is a question that they do like to ask in the exam as well. So it is really important that you do understand how much would be charged per item. What I would suggest, whilst you're in the pharmacy, have a look at prescription before you even dispense it and try and calculate and test yourself how many charges would this patient have to pay. And then when you process it and it tells you, at least then you know if you're right or wrong. And I think that's probably one of the best ways to learn as well. You know, I'm a big advocate for actively revising at work, and this is definitely one of the ways that you can do that. So as I mentioned before, I will include all the links in the description box below, so do check it out. I hope you found this video useful, and if you did, why not give it a thumbs up? Please like, share, subscribe, do visit my Facebook, Instagram and Twitter page, and until next time, good luck with your revision and happy revising!